Welcome to Lesson 4, Part 2, Selecting, Moving, and Copying Your Objects. Back in Adobe Illustrator, this is where we left off for the last lesson. There are a couple other tricks that I want to show you guys that you will be needing to use for your first Adobe Illustrator exercise. And first one I want to show you is rotating an object. To rotate an object, we do initially use our regular selection tool and we select the object that we wish to rotate. I just selected a group of objects, so I'm going to go ahead and ungroup those. Okay, and again, you can ungroup using your keyboard shortcut, or you can ungroup using your drop-down menus. So I have ungrouped those objects. I'm going to select my object, and I'm going to go to the Rotate tool. Now the Rotate tool is right here, and you will see that underneath that is the Reflect tool, which we're also going to look at. Let's start with the Rotate tool. There are a couple different ways that you can rotate. When you select rotate, it does come up with your point of origin, which is your center point. And you can simply grab one of the corners when you see the double-sided arrow pop up and the regular selection tool. Or you can also double-click on the rotate tool and you can give it a precise angle. If you want to see what this is going to look like, you can hit the preview button. And let's say I want to move this 45 degrees. Click OK, and it will move this 45 degrees for me. Okay, the other way of rotating your object without using the rotate tool is simply to use your regular selection tool. Select your object and go to the corner until you see this double-sided curved arrow, and then click and drag your object around. Okay, and it'll come up with the degree that you're moving it. You can see those numbers popping up, which is sometimes quite helpful as well. Okay. That's one of the rotate tools. Underneath your rotate tool is also the reflect tool, which is also another helpful tool that you guys can use in your first Illustrator exercise. With the reflect tool, you want to make sure that you have an object selected, and then click on your reflect tool, double click, and you have a couple options here. But when you do a reflection, it takes the object and it flips it according to the horizontal, vertical, or a specific angle that you have selected. And you can either simply click OK and it will simply move that object, or you can also click Copy, which will keep the original object but will also add an additional copy of that object with this axis reflection. So it's kind of nice that you can do multiple things with the same tool. You will definitely need to use this on your first Illustrator exercise. It will save you a lot of time. When you're working on that first exercise, there's no reason to do every single rectangle or shape that is on that object. You can simply do one or two objects and then make copies and reflections of that object and then align those objects together. It takes a lot less time, and it will encourage you to use more of the tools that are at your fingertips with this software. Okay, so again, you can rotate a couple different ways. Okay, you can use the reflect tool or you can use the rotate tool, and they are both located here. You'll want to experiment with both of those. Another tool I want to show you is the scale tool. Underneath the scale tool, there's also the shear and the reshape tool. We'll get to shear a little bit later, and reshape I believe is in lesson 5. For the scale tool, this is adjusting the size of your object. Once you have an object selected and you've gone to the scale tool, you can double click on scale and you can ask it to change the size of your object. Obviously 100% is the regular size. If you want to go smaller, you can type in 75 for instance, and if you have the preview button on, you can see what that's going to look like. Also at the bottom you will see that it says scale, stroke, and effects. We don't have any effects on here right now. We do have a stroke on here, but you can choose to have this selected on or off, and it's a subtle change at this size, but you can see the difference in how the stroke is affected. But you can choose that on or off. I usually leave it on, but that's a personal choice. If you want an object to go larger, that is of course another option. And you can click a copy to make a copy of this object but also retain the original, or you can simply click OK and it will change the object that you have selected to something different. I'm going to select copy. So it will keep my original object, which is directly underneath this one, and also created a new object. I'm going to move that away so you can see the original and see the one that I went up to 125% of its original size. Okay, the last thing in this lesson is saving objects, or saving files rather. When you have come to a finishing point for the day, and even several times while you're working, you will want to save your objects or save your files. I recommend saving every few minutes as you're working. For the initial save, you want to go to File, Save As. And for everything that you create during this term, you will need to create 2 different copies. One will be using the format of Adobe Illustrator, which is the AI extension, and the other is using Adobe PDF, which is the PDF extension. You will need to make a copy of everything that you do this semester with both file extensions, so you'll have 2 copies of every single file. Okay, I'm going to put this under Miscellaneous, and I'm just going to do Lesson 4, and I'm going to save it first as a PDF. Hit Save, and it will come up with some questions for you about what you want to do. For the most part, you just leave these as default settings and click Save PDF. And then you'll also want to go, oops, now see this opened up PDF, the Adobe Acrobat, so I could see it as a PDF file. I'm going to close that just for a moment. Go back to Adobe Illustrator, File, Save As, and this time I'm going to do Adobe Illustrator. And I'm going to keep the same title because it just changes the extension. I'm going to hit Save, and it will come up with more questions for you, but again, these are default, so you can go ahead and keep these and click OK. So now I have this saved as an Adobe Illustrator Lesson 4. It's also as a PDF file. So as I'm working today, I can just hit Apple S and it will update the saving every time I do that. Alright, this is the end of Lesson 4. We'll move on to Lesson 5 next.